While they're getting settled, I just want to say hello and welcome to everyone. Welcome to the open house. I'm grateful to be here to moderate our first panel of the day, our faculty panel. So I'm going to start off, as Alfred mentioned, my name is Alex Schroder. I'm Associate Director of Academic Initiatives here at the Columbia Climate School, and I am now going to introduce our faculty. So first up is Dr. Steve Cohen. Dr. Cohen is Senior Vice Dean of the School of Professional Studies and is a professor in the practice of public affairs at the School of International and Public Affairs, SIPA. He is also the director of the MPA program in Environmental Science and Policy, as well as the director of the MS in Sustainability Management. He is also the director of the Earth Institute's research program on sustainability policy and management. And in addition, Dr. Cohen served as the executive director of the Earth Institute from 2006 to 2018. Next, we have Dr. Mingfang Ting. Dr. Ting is a professor of climate and co-senior director for education at the Columbia Climate School. Dr. Ting also serves as the co-director of the MA in Climate and Society program. Her research spans a broad range of topics in the climate sciences, including Asian monsoon variability and change, droughts and heat wave mechanisms, the Atlantic multidecadal variability and impact, polar lower latitude interactions, and tropical cyclones. Next, we have Rochelle McCadney, who is an environmental and social risk management professional with global experience in the energy and extractive industries. She is currently a vice president with Citigroup in environmental and social risk management, and serves as an adjunct associate professor for the workshop in applied earth systems management within the MPA ESP program. And she is also an alumna of the MPA ESP program at SIPA. And last but not least, we have Dr. Brendan Buckley, who is the co-director of the MS in Sustainability Science program, and also a Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory research professor. He is a longtime member of the Tree Ring Lab at Lamont, and while he has worked in locations around the globe, Buckley has been one of the pioneers of tropical dendroclimatology, having produced the longest and best replicated records of absolutely dated tree ring sequences from Southeast Asia. Buckley is a proponent of interdisciplinary research, working with historians, archaeologists, geochemists, and atmospheric scientists. So we're thrilled to have this expert panel of faculty with us today. We are going to have questions that each of them will answer, and there will be time for Q&A at the end. So my first question, which I will direct to Dr. Cohen, and then we can move down, is how does your research and practice inform the courses that you teach?
Well, I think I could say it actually informs the programs that I developed, the MPA in Environmental Science and Policy and the Sustainability Management program. So the first piece of that is that you really can't do policy and management in this field without science. And the degree of scientific illiteracy among decision makers in the United States is quite profound. The new Speaker of the House doesn't even think there's a climate problem. And that's probably because most of his money comes from the fossil fuel industry. But I think my time in EPA really convinced me at the very start of my career. One of the things that happened was we sold the Congress in 1980 on cleaning up America's toxic waste sites through a program called Superfund. And then I go to a meeting with toxicologists and environmental engineers, and they said, well, we don't know how to clean up toxic waste sites. So I said, well, what do we do with the $2 billion? And they said, that's a good question. So they came up with another question, which is how clean is clean? When do you stop cleaning a waste site and you can actually live or work on top of toxic land? And that became something called brownfield. So throughout my career, engagement in practice, my own research has been focused largely on, at least in the last decade, combining environmental policy and management. And it formed a new field called sustainability management, where we actually say you can't manage an organization without an understanding of these physical issues. This is now largely recognized by industry. Over 90% of the Standard & Poor's top 500 corporations now produce ESG reports, and about another week or two, the Securities and Exchange Commission is going to require carbon disclosure. The state of California and the European Union already does. So pretty much every corporation in the world is going to be hiring people like you to help them produce these carbon disclosure reports. I call it the Environment and Sustainability Management Full Employment Act of 2023, because they're going to need expertise to do this very, very important work. It's the equivalent of the creation of the profession of accounting in the 1930s when the SEC first required financial statements from corporations. So all of this is to say that this professional engagement I've had as a practitioner certainly has been part of my research work throughout my career, resulting in a number of books that if you're in my class you have to read, and it's one way to get people to read my stuff. And I think that what it really, the integration of practice, research, and education is profound in all of these programs and is really a very important lesson that we at Columbia feel strongly about.
Thank you. Yeah, so I totally agree. I think you can't really teach these programs without the foundational science and practice. So the MA in Climate Society is designed, in fact, designed for in the beginning, very beginning, for students to train the students with the skills that they can go out and effectively communicate the foundational science behind climate change, climate variability, and utilize that knowledge for helping the society to succeed in combating this climate crisis. So that's from the very beginning. For example, the program started about 20 years ago, which was purely based on science results, breaking through research results based on El Nino Southern Oscillation and how you can successfully predict El Nino Southern Oscillation, which started at the International Research Institute in Climate and Society up at the Lamont campus, where the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory is also located. So a lot of research breakthroughs are done on that campus, and including this particular breakthrough in the 1980s. And so the idea there is this is which leads to ENSO prediction leads to seasonal climate prediction. That information is so valuable and powerful for people who can utilize that, and for farmers, planning their agricultural practices, for water managers to decide what to do with the, water management. So all of that is, basically stem from the research. And absolutely agree with Dr. Cohen here. It's all intertwined, so you can't really separate them. And for myself, I teach climate variability, climate change, or foundational climate science in the MA in Climate Society program. And as Alex said, that's exactly what I do. So obviously, this is directly applying research into the classroom. And in fact, all of our faculties in the program, whether they're doing climate, involved in climate science research, impact research, adaptation mitigation research, they are all active researchers in the forefront of their fields, and they bring that experience into the classroom, directly interacting with the students and teaching our students the skills they need to go out and solve the problem. And another thing that as researchers, we all know that we need a big team to solve problems. So that's another thing we bring, as a key feature in the program. We encourage everyone, all the classes to have a lot of group activities, group discussions, group projects. So students are learning from each other. They're bringing different perspectives, and particularly bringing their multidisciplinary perspectives, because students are coming from, as Alfred, I think, already said, very diverse backgrounds. And they really, really enjoy working together as a team, and that is exactly what we do in true research field. We work in a team with students, postdocs, co-workers, together solve the problem and writing papers and publish our results. So all of that is directly, clearly informed by research practices.
you. Okay, sorry, can everyone hear me? As an adjunct, and having been a practitioner in Wall Street for 5 years, and before that in both the oil and gas and renewables industry, I bring a sort of real-world perspective to the workshop in Applied Earth Systems Management. Students are able to, much like they do in their science classes, work together to tackle a policy implementation challenge, having built on the foundation of the introductory science courses during the summer. I should probably repeat, I'm both an alum of the MPA ESP program, class of 2009. So I guess 16 years ago, I was sitting where you are, and I started the program during the fall of 2008. Some of you may remember what was taking place during that time. So I didn't exactly expect 15 years later to be working on Wall Street, but I'll tell you it has been a very interesting journey where science communication has been critical, both understanding the debates within the scientific community, as well as understanding the various policy levers and opportunities within the private sector. And this is not just capitalizing on tax credits, although we are very excited to see the recent passage of the IRA, but really working in a productive way to solve the most challenging problems and certainly the urgency of the climate crisis. That said, I owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. Cohen, because before I entered the workforce, I didn't know much about the Superfund program. As opposed to starting off in the EPA, I started off at an oil company that you may have heard of, that had major cleanup liabilities, many sites listed across Montana and Colorado that were on the national priorities list, as well as a host of urban cleanup challenges, like things like leaking underground storage tanks at gas stations, and that had broad global commitments to go beyond petroleum. I think I may have given away the name already, but that said, and having been on the inside, it reminded me of a lot of discussions I had with my classmates on campus. When I started the program, I was only a year out of undergrad, so I had essentially zero real-world work experience, but having had the benefit of classmates that worked in government beforehand, worked in the private sector, that were pivoting in their careers, it gave me an idea of the path forward. I also took advantage of Columbia being in the city of New York and pursued an internship at the the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, which helped me kind of get an understanding of how environmental contamination issues figure into big project construction. So for those of you that are new to New York City, recognize that it's much like the policy world is constantly iterating. But that said, just to suffice to say, the practitioner piece of where I get involved is sometimes long anecdotes like this, but also just kind of guiding students as they are unpacking and discovering how Congress works at the federal level or state governments, and how to maintain legislative priorities through the agency rulemaking process, and how as individuals we can all be change makers, regardless of where we land. Okay.
I'm Brendan Buckley. I'm at the Lamont Earth Observatory, and there's a problem when you work with really smart people. You have to follow up really great answers. I'm a little bit of a loss, but I teach one class in the Sustainability Science program. It's predicting the effects of climate change on the global forest. I'm a tree ring scientist, and I've been doing this for about 4 decades, working in different parts of the world. And it started because I love being in wild places and I love trees. It just was something that I did just naturally, and the science sort of organically grew from that love. But what I've been finding over the years is I started doing this seriously in the mid-'80s. And at that point, looking at trees at the most extreme environments, because those are the ones that were affected by climate. And at this point, believe it or not, there was still quite a bit of debate going on about the climate story and what was going on with when we would produce something that showed there was a warming trend in some place. People would always say, well, how do we know it's not CO2 fertilization, or it's not something else, or urban heat island effect, or something that was going on? And so I took this interest in looking at the extreme environments like the northern tree line in Alaska or Labrador, or Mongolia, working with Gordon Jacoby, or going into places where one climate factor would be maximized, like going to the aridity limits for plants. And so I started seeing this effect of these extreme environments on trees, that started to realize there were a lot of nonlinearities in the way forests respond to climate. And that's where my interest started taking me into to what I look at these days. And so I designed this class to be using the primary literature. We go through things that are coming. Sometimes literally the paper will come out this week and it's interesting, it's relevant. And so we'll bring it into the class and we'll use that. And so the work that I've done is greatly informative to what I do in the classroom. I have a lot of interest in how all these things intersect between climate and forest and ecosystem services they provide, and how there's quite a bit of inequity in the way those services are provided to individuals around the planet. I'll give you one example. Working in Southeast Asia, the indigenous populations that live around these tropical highland forests are often the ones with the least amount of rights to the services that those places provide. And as we see climate change affecting things like who's coming into environments and taking over a forested area for commerce, for coffee plantations or other things, it's always the indigenous populations that get pushed out. So I think there's this really important intersection between the science and the environment and what we do as society as to how we treat the people that need these services. And in fact, there's one thing we can't get away from is we're all breathing the same air, we're all drinking the same water. All of this is connected, and I think that research that I've been doing over the years informs everything that I do in this class. So.
Thank you for those fantastic answers. Excuse me. We're going to move on to our next question, which is, all of our sustainability and climate programs offer unique access to faculty and academic and professional opportunities. So if each of you could speak to this, what types of interactions do you have with students in your courses or as a program leader? And what types of opportunities do students have to engage in research or practice with you or your colleagues? Steve, go ahead.
Well, the programs that I direct are really designed for engagement between students and faculty. First, we have a lot of practitioner faculty, and what I say during my information sessions is our primary objective of our program is for you to have a better job that when you leave the program than the one you had when you arrived, and that it be a job helping to save the world from environmental catastrophe. That's really our objective. And so we have a lot of practitioner faculty, and in both programs, we have a real mission-driven student body and a real mission-driven faculty. We're not about, in either program, creating academics to write papers and do research about the problem. We're really designed to have people go out and do things. So there's a heavy emphasis in both the programs I direct on management, which is one of my fields. It's one thing to just design something and think it up, lots of wonderful theoretical ideas about what to do in public policy, but then you got to translate it into reality in the real world. And many of these academic programs have academics who've never done anything like that. And I've devoted most of my career to doing things in the real world to actually make change, and I know how difficult it is. But the other thing I'd say we do in our program is we have optimists and people that are actually making change. And I can tell you in the 40 years or so I've been in this field, I've seen an enormous sea change in the way people think about these problems and the integration of business practice and environmental protection, the amount of work being done everywhere to make this change is really quite profound, and that infuses our programs. And our students, so the opportunities specifically that they have, I have a research group in the Earth Institute in Sustainability Policy and Management. All the research assistants come from our various programs, including the undergraduate major in Sustainable Development, which you didn't hear about today, which has some of the most talented people you've ever seen. In fact, Maya Lugo, who runs the MPA in Environmental Science and Policy, is a graduate of that program, and so it's spectacular. And so we put people to work on our research, but we also, because of our practitioner adjunct faculty, give people opportunities to do internships and other kinds of projects in agencies that are actually doing the work. New York City is the largest economy in the United States. We have 20 million people living within an hour of where I'm sitting right now. And the American economy is the largest in the world. And so the fastest growing part of the world economy is the green economy. And so the economic opportunity in this field, in this region, is unparalleled. And our faculty provide access to it throughout the nonprofit, private, and public sector.
Yes, so in the Climate Society MA program, we actually, each student is assigned to an academic advisor who are core course faculty members and other elective course instructors. So as I said, these are all active researchers, so they have direct connection with faculty members in this way. And I myself, for example, this year I have about 15 students who are my advisees, and I meet with them regularly. So that's one way I interact with the students. And of course, as a program director, my door's always open. So students always come in, and whenever they have any issues, they can come in and chat with me. So that's another channel for all the students to interact with me. And as Steve said, we have our students are also involved in a lot of research projects directly. We have something called departmental research assistant. Basically, research assistant working on active projects, research projects, assisting faculty members, other researchers at the Lamont, other centers directly involved in research and activities with students, with PhD students, with postdocs, with other researchers in a team to solve a problem. So there are really a lot of opportunities for students to get involved with myself, with other faculty members, with researchers at large, really, across Columbia. And as you probably heard, we always very proud that Columbia University is probably one of the largest, if not one of the largest, or if not the largest, I guess that's the way to put it, with climate research, climate solution, climate impacts research, all of that combined. So we have huge resource here across the Columbia University community and Columbia Climate School, of course, particularly, that students can get involved. And informally or formally, there's the formal way, the RA, but also informally, just chat with people, finding something out, and get involved. So yes, plenty of opportunity for students to interact with faculty members, with researchers across the university.
I certainly echo that sentiment, having both been on the student side and as a adjunct faculty member, having access to researchers at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatories is crucial. One of my old professors that was a pioneering scientist working on CCS is still a point of contact for me as we're looking to try to commercialize direct air capture. That's like a 15-year relationship that's been intact. I often caution my students about their time management, especially during the fall and spring semester, because there are so many different colloquia, seminars, dignitaries coming on campus, diplomats, and a lot of our scientists are also have a media presence as well. So, sometimes my family will see updates on the news and say, do you know what this is about? Are you involved? Sometimes, lately the answer has not been yes, but there was a time, certainly when I was on campus, where there were opportunities for research assistantships or TAing a class, or above all else, definitely go to your professor's office hours, learn as much as you can from them, from both their experience in academia, or if they are practitioners, their real world experience, because it's certainly a lot easier to transmit and learn about their experiences than to kind of repeat the same mistakes. To the points that were raised, the job outlook continues to improve. If you are in a program that is part-time, there's certainly more opportunities for you to pursue full-time work opportunities. I just want to clarify, for the MPA ESP program, it's not generally encouraged for you to pursue an internship because it is a very intensive program, but if you are willing to sacrifice a bit of your time, maybe your sanity, to just maximize on the experience, it can be done, and the administrators are supportive of that. And I think, the last piece I wanted to mention in terms of faculty Also, because all of the programs are multidisciplinary, you do not hesitate to look to electives in other schools. I took courses at the law school, the engineering school. SUMA did not exist as a program when I was here, but I'm so excited to see the range of courses available, particularly those with a social justice lens and discussion of environmental justice. So whatever you're interested in, there's very likely an expert on campus that is reachable via email, or perhaps something that you can add to your course load should you decide to matriculate.
Thank you. Our program is, most of our faculty in sustainability science are Lamont research professors like I am. So we tend to be what are referred to as soft money research scientists, meaning we're grant writing, and National Science Foundation, NASA, NOAA. We raise our money for the work that we do to that. And when we get these grants, there's typically funding in there that will allow us to take on interns on an hourly casual basis. And that's what I've been doing individually with students from my class that end up having an interest in the work that we're doing. For example, I had 3 or 4 students working with me on a transect of the Himalayan tree rings that we collected over many years from the Himalayas down through New Zealand in Tasmania, and looking at a new way of analyzing the woods and looking at density and how that relates to these large-scale climate factors. So that's something that several students have worked on, and I know that the other faculty have been doing that as well. So there's been some people working with GIS application and other things. I think some biological oceanography. At this point, it's been sort of just people's connection and through their professors in the class. They take an interest in a class that they've got, and they'll end up working that way. We're trying to make it a bit of a more formal thing going down the road, but for now, it tends to work out for people who'd like to come and do an internship with someone that they have seen their work through the classes they're taking. They'll get an idea of making that connection. What I do personally in my own classes, when I have collaborators come, like for instance, the director of the WSL in Switzerland, the forestry research group came, and I bring them to the class. And so I'll work in the discussion sections that we'll have, they'll come. I've done it with 3 different researchers working on really widely different topics. And I also, for the final project, will have a certain research paper that the students will write. And I encourage them to look for people, it could be anywhere in the world, and I may know, I have collaborators I've had for 40 years now from all over the place. And so I'll often put them in touch, and not always do they get back in touch with students, but usually they do. And so there's been some communication this way through just connections that we have from doing research for years. And so we really been encouraging that. But I would say for our program, the most important thing is we're mostly Lamont research professors, so there's this really strong connection to the Lamont Doherty research team, and people tend to take advantage of that, which is great.
Great. So as you can see, there's really a diversity of opportunities to get involved in both academic and practice with your professors and the program and the climate school in Columbia as a whole. So our next question, our final question before we move on to the Q&A portion, is what is one characteristic or opportunity within your program that you can highlight as an example of what really makes the experience special? Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I think in all the programs, it's the capstones where we do group projects. Even though sustainability management is largely oriented to the private sector, we've been trying to create what I call a pro bono tradition, the same way that lawyers have. And so all of our projects are for nonprofits or government agencies. Often they have a private sector impact, but that's done in that program. And then the MPA, all the projects are for government and nonprofit, and they are performed as a public service. And as you heard before, all of these papers from the beginning of both programs, 2003 for environmental science and policy, which started in 2002, 2003, and since 2011 in the sustainability management program, all the papers are there on the website, and videos of the briefings that students learn how to give 10-minute briefings representing the work they've done over the course of a semester, because that's usually as long as you can get in front of a decision maker. You're lucky to get that much time. So the workshop or capstone in both programs is the signature. Also teaches people how to work together. We're in a field that requires science, policy, management, law, engineering, health, all working together. And so learning how to work in a team is essential. And most of our courses have many group projects, but it's the capstone that really is the ultimate piece of that experience. And many of our projects have had real impact in the real world. At one point, for example, you were not allowed to have a hybrid taxi cab in New York City, and our students did an analysis which demonstrated that it was both practical and should be done right away, and the Taxi and Limousine Commission actually changed their policy based on our paper. Many, many examples of the influence of our work, because very often we're ahead of the game. We're way before other people are looking at things. So I'd say that's the one signature piece.
Totally agree. Steve just took my words out of my mouth too, right? Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Capstones. In our case, we also have internships. So students can choose to do either internship or capstone in their final semester, summer semester here, and some of them do both. They feel they have the energy to actually participate in both. So capstone projects is definitely one way, this team building, as Steve said. One example of this summer, we had a team of 4 or 5 students working together on assessing hurricane risk in Tampa Bay. And that was like, just working with Lamont scientists and trying to determine that. And one of the outcome is that the risk is quite low for that particular region. So it becomes a very interesting research question. Why is it so low? Is it just for that particular location? What contributes to that? So it feeds back to also the researchers, and then they can follow up on kind of investigating the mechanism. So capstones both, kind of works in both ways, as referring back to sort of the research opportunities. But the other thing I wanted to also mention in the other program probably, but particularly I'm more familiar with the Climate Society program, it's a truly interdisciplinary program. Students come from all different backgrounds, anything you can think of. We've had musicians in the program, we've had comedians in the program, we've had artists, of course, lots of artists, and they produce amazing products too. When we have group projects, they work on communicating one concept about climate change to the public. They make 5 minutes video, and one group, I was blown away. They use Billy Joel's tune and singing and sending out the climate forcing and playing as a skeptic. So climate skeptic, and trying to convince, communicate why climate change is real. So the talents are so deep in the class, in the classroom. So what that turns out, why I say this is such a unique feature is because they all work together as a team. In capstone, of course, at the end, but also in various class projects. So bringing multidisciplinary angle toward a real-world problem or class project problem, and building this collaborative skill. And as Steve said, this climate crisis is way too big a problem for a single person to handle. So this really needs a lot of teamwork, and we emphasize that, and particularly students are so perfect in this case. They are coming from this diverse backgrounds, and they work together, and they learn from each other, and really building this collaboration skills that will be so extremely useful when they go out to work with people, even the skeptics in the world, eventually, to solve this problem. So.
Yeah, I definitely echo both the previous sentiments. I'll add that I find my students to be so inspiring, certainly with their idealism coming in. I try not to extinguish it with too much pragmatism or realism, as it were, but certainly look to help them understand the mechanics of the policymaking process. If we're looking at a US example, I encourage my international students to infuse some of what they may know from their backgrounds, and together we kind of tackle, like should we continue with the status quo? And are there better approaches that are perhaps discussed in other classes that would really inform the outcome of the group project? So I view the capstone as kind of a culmination of I teach during the fall, of both the summer and fall experiences where they've, have a sort of a scientific toolkit that they're building during the summer, and then they're actively learning about public management during the fall and kind of operationalizing it through the capstone and coming up with a tactical approach. So I find that by the end of the semester, we still have our optimism and idealism intact, but kind of a path forward as to how we can achieve outcomes, and certainly a stark realization about how much funding, public, private, or otherwise, would be needed to tackle these major challenges.
They've kind of said it all already. It's really the same deal in all of our, these capstones are clearly what bring everyone together. And our cohort's much smaller than some of these other programs, so it's maybe a little bit more of an intimate connection to people that much better because it's a smaller group perhaps. But without any question, it's the capstone projects that sort of tie this whole thing up and give people the finish to the program.
Great. All right, so we're going to move into the Q&A portion, and I would just ask that, raise your hands. We'll have mics rotating around. If you could direct your question to either, one specific faculty, or if you have a question for all of them, and then they could all, provide a brief response. It doesn't seem like it's on.
Should we take one?
Hold on one moment. No, we won't because we record.
Gotta get you on the tape.
Oh, hi, this is a question for Dr. Ting. In the Climate and Society department program, could you elaborate a little bit more about the background of the students? And I've got a worry that you've probably come across before with your students is, if you don't have much of a scientific background, but you've got a lot of experience in, say, communications or policy, how easy/hard is it for you to really get the really important scientific grounding that you're all saying that we need in order to do the job that we want to do after we come out of the program?
Great question. As I said, our students' body are so diverse. So you are, definitely right there. Your background, you said, communication policy. So we actually are, our program's designed in a way to really reach everyone. In this case, particularly the science course I teach, climate science course, this semester, we're doing a flipped classroom format. It's being, students really love it. The way we do it is that we recorded lectures first, and students can watch it at their own pace. So they're not all sitting in the big lecture room and listen to the same lecture delivered by the professors. And some of them may be lost, in midway, and then can't catch up, right? So this way, you sit at home, do that part, and then you come back to the classroom and for Q&A discussion, and we have a lot of group discussion in the classroom. And then, if there's any concept that people not clear, then we go through them and then work on the problem sets. So actually enhance your understanding through working through the problems. So that is definitely one way for us to, sort of, we used to be able to teach in the big classroom. We have, ways to help students, but this seemed to be one way to really reach all the students in an effective way, so that not wasting anyone's time in that sense. And the format so far, the feedback we got from students are really, really positive. So I think that will be one way to alleviate the stress level for some students who may not have the kind of quantitative background. But on the other hand, we have a real big teaching team too. So the helps are there. We have TAs, we have associates, teaching associates that's helping individual help with students as well as TA office hours. And of course, the instructors are always there. So absolutely, the purpose of the program, as I said, is to reach to the students who really are passionate about climate science, climate impact, climate change, and wanted to do it. So we're not leaving people out at all. In fact, I don't know if Alfred said that, but our students' body currently are maybe on the order of 60% social science, arts, humanities, and 40% with science, environmental science background. So.
Another question?
Any other questions?
you. Hello, I'm Gerard Sims. I just had a question, I guess, for Brandon and maybe Dr. Buckley and Dr. Ting. I guess, how in the weeds does the courses go into the science aspects? Or is this just a high-level approach? Is what we need to know, kind of communicate it out, or are we going into the, I guess, physical processes of how climate change works?
Maybe Dr. Buckley, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
In our program, we have, the backgrounds of the students is quite varied too. And so we have people, they'll have some sort of science background, but it might be in a different field from what, let's say my class. Most of the students in there, we're looking at a lot of ecophysiology, botany, some evolutionary scale things that go back to the Devonian, to how functional traits come out in plants. And what I don't expect people to do is understand the pure mathematics in something they're reading. I want them to understand how to read a scientific paper without the definite background. That you might not have a botany background or an ecophysiology background, but there's ways of figuring out what the paper means. And then if you have questions on a method, we do a glossary every week when we read a paper. So the 1 or 2 students will lead a particular paper, and they do the best they can to sort out the paper. They can come to me if they have questions. But I'm amazed at how well these students do without the necessary specific background in a subject. So we tend not to try to get too into the weeds of a specific thing that would be tied to one field, so that someone with any science background, or in some cases, I get journalism students that take. Anyway, first of all, the journalism school here at Columbia is amazing, and these students are really top notch. They're science journalism students, and they love the class because they're able to understand the science in a way that helps them convey it. So we don't expect you to go into the weeds, as you say, in that sort of specific way, but you will understand the science behind what you're studying in every class that we offer. So I hope that answers your question, but it's, we're not expecting you to become a botanist overnight or a climate scientist overnight, but you will walk out of those classes understanding what the science is all about.
Yeah, similarly, I don't think we get to the, very detailed science aspect of it. I think, for example, we're not expecting students to be able to, write down all the, fluid dynamics equations on the blackboard or something like that. So they need to understand by words. We want them to explain using English language, for example, to communicate, rather than using numbers, equations, which is what we do. And in fact, we need you because we're not doing great job of communicating, because we're, so focused on those, quantitative information sometimes. So absolutely, the students get exposed to those information. So we do class projects, as I said, we bring in maps, we bring in, why is the temperature increasing? You do look at the numbers, you work on some of those in class setting, but it's not the purpose. The purpose is to learn what's behind it. How do you effectively communicate that information to the public? So you never are expected to do the kind of research that we do, running computer codes and, trying to, or in the lab, trying to do things that we tend to focus on as a scientist deeply in the research. So.
Don't you find you always have 1 or 2 students, though, you can do that, and they help the rest of the class? That's one of the things I've been finding.
Yes.
Some of them are just off the charts with what they're able to do, and it always really blows my mind.
That's actually one point I wanted to make a slightly different angle. So some of the students coming into the program didn't really know they wanted to do that, the real, kind of deep into the research world. And we do have a fraction of the students eventually wanted to go in to PhD program and study more and involved in science research. And of course, there are a lot of students go off to, study policy and other side of, the other PhD program. But there are a fraction of students, in fact, wanted to do PhD in the climate science research. Yeah.
I think I saw this first, and then we'll go over.
Hello. I have a question. I am particularly interested in knowing what you would say the difference is, or the differentiator between the MS Sustainability Management and the MA Climate and Society, in terms of Is it that the MS in sustainability management has more flexibility in the cross-registration journey, or like, what are you prepared to do after each one of those programs, which to me right now is a little bit nebulous?
Well, the Sustainability Management Program is a management program. And so we don't want to create PhDs. We're not interested in people going on to research careers. Some do anyway. People don't always do what we want them to do. But our program is designed for people to run organizations and to understand all the different elements of finance, management, strategy, just like an MBA would have. But we also require a public policy course and require 3 courses on what we call the physical dimensions of sustainability, which we think the current MBAs don't get. The same thing with current public policy students. They don't get any science either. And so in the highly complex technological world we live in, to try to manage an organization without an understanding of some part of the technology and the science that we operate, I just don't know how you can do that anymore. So the difference between these programs, I mean, Mark Kane, who developed the MA in Climate and Society, is a great friend of mine, and what he wanted to do with that program is he and his colleague Steve Zibiak had developed the first mathematical model to predict the El Nino effect, actually in the late 1970s, but nobody was paying attention to it. And so he wanted to create a program where students would actually understand these scientific issues and put them to work. That's part of the logic of the Sustainability Management Program as well, but taken from a different perspective. The MA in Climate and Society, I would say, is a more academically oriented program, more research-based. The Sustainability Management Program is more action-based. But I would say that Sustainability Management, because it only has 2 required courses, the students shape their own programs. And so if you want to go into a think tank, you can still do it coming out of Sustainability Management. I think environmental science and policy and climate and society or sustainability science are probably better for that, but students often in their educational journey change what they want to do. But I think what sustainability management does that is fairly unique among these programs is it's a management program. It's really designed to educate people to run things like Alex here, who's helping to run part of the climate school and has a sustainability management degree.
I do want to correct one thing. I would not characterize MA in Climate Society as a research-facing program. I think we are very much in action as well. Solution is one of the key emphasis of our students. Students come to the program, I said, we have a small fraction of students do want to eventually get into research, but that's a very small fraction. So a lot of them are geared toward learning the climate science very, broadly, right? We have the climate dynamics of climate change and climate variability, and then we have the climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation. So all of and then there's the climate justice, of course, quite a few climate justice courses. So students are passionate about finding the solution and solve the climate crisis. And the difference, I would characterize one thing is that we do emphasize climate a lot more than the sustainability management, because sustainability is the key thing. So here we're very much focused on climate sector. So, as we know, climate is obviously everywhere nowadays. So there are, students are going out directly to the field, out there in private sector, public sector, government, all kinds of places. Small fraction will go into academia, but I would say we're not particularly geared toward that. So.
One of the things I would say also is that all the programs are designed to create translators between decision makers and the scientists. And so that's one of the distinguishing factors of all of these programs, because there's a science piece to all of them, and it's a kind of continuum. But whereas sustainability science, environmental science and policy, and climate society, a lot of the instructors are actually researchers. In sustainability management, they're not. they're mainly practitioners. And I think that's a distinguishing factor of the SUMA program.
Great. I saw your hand before, yes. Yeah.
Hi, this is a question for Dr. Ting. You did just kind of touch on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you can speak a little bit more about examples of the kinds of research that students do get involved in and how that kind of like plays into the interdisciplinary nature of the program. Thank you.
Great, yeah. So I can definitely speak to one of my own experience. So I've had, this is a couple years ago, I have a DRA student working with me. Now, I'm more a climate science researcher, but when the student approached me and wanted to work with me, so we talked about, how we can apply that to impact. So we worked on the crop yield impact by, in the cornfield, corn belt, how that is impacted by humid and dry extreme heat in the atmosphere, which is what I focused on understanding the mechanism of these. But then the student came in and wanted to really dig into the crop yields and how that is linked to that. So a lot of the students do get into research with Lamont scientists, myself, like myself, and focused on natural science, but they bring in this angle of really geared toward application. How can we use the knowledge of climate science into understanding, another example is human health, right? So extreme heat is very impactful to human health. I had another one working on how humid heat is impacting summer kids' school activities. So those are kind of, very narrow example because there are so many different projects. We solicit people to submit their project in the summer. So when the students come in, you get to choose what you want to work on based on the proposed project. So when we select those projects, we usually get tons and tons of projects. Then we select those projects that is more interdisciplinary focused. So that's how we kind of get students really involved in interdisciplinary research.
We are actually going to have to end here so we can allow everyone to take a quick break before we go into our next panel. Thank you so much for your questions, and please join me in thanking our fantastic faculty panel.